Okay, the next item of business is a statement by Natalie Dawn-Innes on the Promise Oversight Board Report 3, progress and next steps towards keeping the promise. The Minister will take questions at the end of her statement, therefore there should be no interventions or interruptions, and I call on Natalie Dawn-Innes, Minister, up to 10 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Keeping the promise is a commitment steadfastly made by this government. It is a commitment that I hold close to my heart in all that I do as Minister, and it is a commitment made unanimously across this chamber. The Independent Care Review told us what has to change, and the Oversight Board have recognised that the recommendations made have not been filed on a shelf nor kicked into the long grass. Instead, they have been embedded into the work that we do across ministerial portfolios, across departments and across the public sector. Despite the unwelcome distraction of a global pandemic, significant progress has been made. So I agree with the Oversight Board when it says that the journey is behind schedule, but still on course. I also agree with the Board when it says the destination is clear and Scotland is heading in the right direction. We can keep the promise made to young people in this country, and we will keep that promise. 2 weeks ago marked the 5th anniversary. This was a point to celebrate what has been achieved so far and an opportunity to reflect on what needs yet to be done. It is my privilege as Minister to meet and hear first-hand individual stories and experiences. Just this month, I met with staff, volunteers and families at Circle in Edinburgh, Martha's Mammies in Glasgow and the Whole Family Wellbeing Support Hub in South Lanarkshire. And this afternoon, I was due to visit the Mother and Child Recovery House in Dundee, run by Aberlour. This service provides 24/7 therapeutic and emotional support to stabilise drug and alcohol use. I want to apologise to the mums and the staff at Cowan Grove as I had to postpone my visit, but I look forward to arranging another time to meet with you soon. Talking to the children, parents, families, staff and volunteers involved in these fantastic projects is a clear reminder to ministers that no story is ever the same. There can be no one-size-fits-all approach. Support and success can mean very different things to different people, and voices must be heard if we want to make real and lasting change. This was a message the First Minister made clear in his letter penned to the Care Experience community in Scotland. So let me now address the Care Experience children, young people, adults and families, one and all, and confirm to you my support and my drive to succeed. And let me pass on my support to the workforce across Scotland who, on a daily basis, keep delivering in our social work departments, schools, our health, our justice services and across so many parts of our lives. I've witnessed the energy and activity underway to bring change, and I thank you for your ongoing drive and commitment. Presiding Officer, I call on all members across this Parliament to continue to work together. Indeed, delivering the promise demands that we break down traditional silos, and this is something that we're doing within government. We have a dedicated Cabinet subcommittee for the promise, and my ministerial colleagues are working closely with me and with each other to bring about the change that we need. For example, the Bairns House commitment sees government bring together education, health and justice portfolio. And the organisation Circle that I mentioned earlier was visited by the Health Secretary back in January so that he could see first-hand how it is supporting young people and families affected by drug and alcohol use in East Lothian. It's part of the Government's Grow Your Own Roots project backed by £4 million, which is now operating in 8 areas. This illustrates the need for the promise to be embedded across government and aligns with the progress report's priority of whole family support. As Plan 21-24 said, to realise a child's rights, you have to support their family, whether it is one they are born into or not, and all families need support at different times. Understanding the change that has happened so far is imperative. The further development of Plan 2430 can set a clear route map for what needs to be done, by whom and by when, and I welcome the Oversight Board's encouragement to all stakeholders to engage in the next stage of setting this strategic direction. Our latest published statistics show a 15.6% reduction in the number of looked-after children between 2020 and 2023. And whilst this number only tells part of the story, the recently launched Promise Progress framework puts the framework in place to track and to review progress and to help inform the action that is required over the next 5 years. The framework consolidates nearly 50 different streams of national data into one place, the first time this has happened, and lets us paint a picture of the state of play nationally. It means organisations can contextualise their own progress and use it for their own reporting to change their processes and in turn change the system. And, Presiding Officer, the system is changing. In August 23, we introduced the Scottish Recommended Allowance for Kinship and Foster Carers, bringing that benefit to over 9,000 families. In June 2024, the Parliament passed the Children's Care and Justice Act and ended the placement of children in young offenders institutions in Scotland. Significant steps have been made in introducing the Bairnshouse model, with 10 Pathfinder and affiliate test sites up and running, backed by almost £10 million of investment to date. In education, we're investing £1 billion in the Scottish Attainment Challenge, including over £130 million in pupil equity funding in this budget, including additional funding to support care-experienced children and young people's attainment and well-being. And since 2021, we've invested £20 million through the Promise Partnership Fund to support local projects and initiatives. As a government, we are committed to a programme of national public sector reform that will support Scotland to move away from crisis intervention. And my colleague Mr McKee led a meeting earlier this week to support the next steps in greater alignment and delivery in public services. Our commitment to whole family support is central to this. Since 2022, we've invested over £110 million through whole family wellbeing funding. And I was pleased the First Minister announced earlier this month that an additional £6 million will be allocated to children's service planning partnerships as part of the 25-26 budget. This increase means that the share of the whole family wellbeing funding provided to children's services planning partnerships will rise from £32 million to £38 million in the 25-26 and 26-27 financial years. It's by stepping alongside families early on that we can break the terrible pattern that results in too many children having to live away from home. Every children's service planning partnership has received a share of this funding, and it has delivered a range of support, including holistic support for parents with mental health or substance abuse, welfare rights advice and the delivery of community-based family support hubs. However, I do of course recognise the calls to action that the Oversight Board have identified, and I'm pleased to say that further engagement is already underway. On homelessness, Scotland has the strongest rights across the UK nations for people experiencing homelessness, and the duties of local authorities and corporate parents to support young people leaving care are set out in legislation. We recognise our role working alongside partners in implementing the Improving Care Leavers Housing Pathways report, and work is planned on or progressing across all of the recommendations. On foster care, the contribution made by our foster carers and our foster families is of the highest value. In November, I launched the next stage of our work to set a vision for the future, shaped by the voices of children and young people, and that prioritises their experiences. Our commitment is that foster care not only provides stability and support, but also that our foster carers are well equipped, well supported and empowered to continue nurturing the children in their care. The role played by kinship carers must also not be understated. As I've said before in this chamber, this is of particular importance to me personally, having experienced informal kinship care in my childhood. I'm determined to strengthen the support available, ensuring kinship carers have the resources they need to care for the children in their families. To do this, we've updated the kinship care guidance and introduced a new kinship care assessment framework to provide clearer, more consistent support for carers and practitioners. And for our young people transitioning out of children's services, we continue to work with staff, the Promise Scotland and key stakeholders to increase coherence around the package of support that is available, including continuing to invest in continuing care and aftercare, broader financial and education supports, and the introduction of the care leaver payment later this year. In delivering this change, the importance of the relationship between national and local government is key. The Scottish Government continues to provide £2.8 million to fund the work of the Promise Scotland and fund a dedicated Promise post within COSLA to work across all 32 local authorities to help build this important link. The Oversight Board is of course clear that there is still a way to go. It recognises that some people, organisations and systems are not yet doing enough, and I want to second their call to step up, to prioritise and to engage. To help enable this, there is a role for legislation, and the Scottish Government is actively working to develop the policy and legal understanding required to prepare a bill for introduction later this year. This is informed by what the Promise tells us must change, and recent engagement and consultation work on children's hearings redesign, moving on, the definition of care experience and the future of foster care. And I'm keen to continue this engagement with all stakeholders, particularly the care experience community, as the legislative drafting and progress through Parliament is made. Whilst this will provide a substantial step forward in facilitating the next stages of our work, I'm conscious that the legislative landscape surrounding the care of children and young people is already wide-ranging, and further legislative direction should not add unnecessarily to this. I'm conscious that legislative change must be accompanied by the required capacity, resource and finance to ensure implementation. Presiding Officer, I do not shy away from the task that we have ahead. We should reflect positively on the progress we've made, and we should look ahead with optimism. Importantly, the Oversight Board says we can deliver the promise by 2030, but we must be open and honest about the work we still have to do. Together, we are working hard towards changes which I believe will have a positive impact for all of Scotland's care-experienced children and young people, and I look forward to hearing the perspectives of members across the chamber this afternoon.
Thank you. The Minister will now take questions on the issues raised in her statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes, after which we'll need to move on to the next item of business. Members wishing to ask a question who haven't already done so should press the request to speak buttons, and I call first Ros McCall.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I thank the Minister for advance sight of her statement and for all the points that have been mentioned in it. But this report from the Oversight Board is saying it's not enough. And the report should be a wake-up call for the Scottish Government that we're not on track to deliver the promise by 2030. Specifically, the report noted that in order to keep the promise, we needed to explicit leadership and drive from the Scottish Government and scrutiny bodies to articulate a clear set of principles, outcomes and milestones, and that this leadership has been severely lacking. Shortcomings that needed urgent attention, including workforce shortages, financial instability for care leavers, inadequate focus, fragmented services, lack of coordination. As I've said before, the list goes on. And I'm afraid that today's statement will do absolutely nothing to address these issues. And frankly, the statement issued by the Minister today does not display the leadership needed. So let me ask the Minister, how will the Scottish Government ensure that the cluttered policy landscape detailed in the report will be addressed? Secondly, how will progress be measured and data be collected to ensure that progress towards 2030 can be put back on track? And thirdly, how will the Scottish Government work at pace to articulate a clear set of milestones that will guarantee that the promise is actually kept?
Minister.
I thank Ros McCall for her questions, although I would disagree in terms of saying that she doesn't feel that anything in the statement will help to, or maybe not exact words, but help to deliver the promise, because I think I set out quite clearly the actions that have been taken, a recognition that we do still have a way to go. I accept that we may not be where we wish to be at 2020 when the promise was made, but as I've said, in my statement, there was a pandemic, there has been a cost of living crisis, but I think that we are in a good position. I think there has been real leadership and there has been real policy change that is going to make a real impact in terms of the lives of children and young people. Now, the member notes issues around the cluttered landscape. That was something I alluded to in my statement. That will be an ongoing track of work. That's something that I'm very aware of in my thinking around the Promise Bill, something that I'm more than happy, I already have discussed with the member, and I'm more than happy to continue. I would also note the importance of the Promise Progress framework and the different factors in that will help to really track that progress across the whole landscape, whether that's Scottish Government, local authority level. So there are a number of ways going forward that we will be tracking that progress. If Ros McCall has any other ideas of how or areas that she would really like to see focused in on, I'm more than happy to discuss that with her.
Martin Whitfield.
Well, I'm very grateful, Deputy Presiding Officer, and can I too thank the Minister for advanced sight. She is aware, of course, that other quotes from the report clearly show that the journey is behind schedule and that we're not halfway there to keeping the promise. And I know the Minister is aware of that. So on two specific points. The first from the letter from the Promise, Children and Young People's Commissioner Scotland, Scottish Human Rights and Equality and Human Rights Commission. When is the Government going to publish the statutory framework on restraint and seclusion? And also, and more worryingly, from an imminent danger point of view, on the 8th of January, when the Minister was asked about secure accommodation in Scotland, the Minister responded in the Chamber to the lack of it. I have said, however, there are regular conversations between the Government partners, heads of secure care, to ensure that a situation such as that does not happen. There are no secure independent secure centre vacancies in Scotland from Tuesday or today. What is the government now going to do about not a hypothetical problem, but one that faces those centres imminently?
Minister.
I thank Martin Whitfield for the important points that he raises. In relation to the situation around secure accommodation capacity, I am very disappointed that we are in this place, and I'm sure the member is aware of that. I am very aware of the ongoing pressures. I am monitoring this pretty much on a daily basis. The member is very aware that secure accommodation demand is complex and volatile. Capacity can be extremely tight. Of course, decisions around the placement of children in secure accommodation remain with and the appropriate continuation placements remain with the relevant decision makers. But I can assure the member that every appropriate action that is being taken to increase capacity, both in the short and the long term, and that goes over and above some of the things that I laid out in my statement back at the beginning of January, are being taken, because this is an extremely important matter. I'm more than happy to discuss some of that with the member if he would like that, and more than happy to update going forward. In relation to the issue of restraint, again, that is something that is underway. I think there are issues in relation to the restraint within different settings. That's something that came up regularly during the passage of the Children, Care and Justice Bill, and again something that is continually being monitored and worked on.
Rona Mackay, to be followed by Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Keeping the promise will require partners across Scotland to work together. The Oversight Board report says that local authorities as corporate parents play a critical role. So can the Minister perhaps outline how the Scottish Government is working with local government to drive progress?
Minister.
I thank Rona Mackay for her question. The scale of the work required to keep the promise requires a cross-portfolio, cross-department and cross-agency response, and that's both national and local. As corporate parents, the Scottish Government, local authorities and all public bodies have a collective responsibility to help shape lives and provide opportunities for our children with care experience who are looked after and young people leaving care. We require visibility, transparency and accountability at all levels. Now, the relationship between national and local government is key to delivering the change required, and the collaboration to develop the Promise Progress framework, the engagement through the network of local authority promise leads and the programme board, including the National Leadership Group, are very good examples, I think, of the joint working that is helping to drive progress. Both the Scottish Government and local government have put in place appropriate structures to monitor and review progress, and I think it's key that we all have a part to play. I would also just add the Scottish Government continues to fund the Promise Scotland and Fiona Duncan in her role as Independent Strategic Advisor, and I'd just like to put on record my thanks to Fiona Fraser and the Promise team for their continued work and their role as a critical ally to government and bodies across Scotland.
Miles Briggs to be followed by Jackie Dunbar.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. It goes without saying we all want to see the promise delivered, but I'm sorry to say this statement does not feel like a government on course to meet the promise. For example, in the statement, the government congratulates itself on homelessness legislation. The fact is, over the past 2 years, there's been a 14% increase in care leavers under 25 being made homeless or threatened with homelessness, a complete failure. And there is nowhere mentioned in this statement on the National Care Service and the National Social Work Agency, which will be key to delivering on the promise. So can I ask the Minister, what is the vision for the National Social Work Agency now, and when will it be delivered?
Minister.
I think I've been very clear before when I've spoken about the workforce in the Chamber. The workforce is absolutely key to helping us not only to deliver on the promise, but I think in relation to a number of government priorities. I'm very pleased with the implementation or the establishment of a national social work agency is absolutely key to supporting our workforce going forward. I don't know if Miles Briggs is entirely happy with my answer here. I'm more than happy to pick up a further discussion with Miles Briggs around the timelines of the National Social Work Agency and what we think can be achieved by that.
Jackie Dunbar to be followed by Paul O'Kane.
Could the Minister say any more about how children's services planning partnerships are supporting families alongside third sector organisations? And can she advise how the Scottish Government is supporting them to carry out this important work?
Minister.
Yeah, children's services planning partnerships are absolutely key and play a very vital role in supporting families and improving outcomes for children. And we know that by shifting that investment from reaction to crisis towards that early intervention and prevention activity, we can improve outcomes for families across Scotland. Collaboration is a legal requirement under the Children and Young People Scotland Act, which mandates local authorities and health boards to develop joint children's services plans, and these plans must involve key stakeholders, including third sector organisations, many of whom are already delivering real change on the ground, to ensure that services are well integrated, proactive and focused on enhancing child wellbeing. That's why we've prioritised funding, I've already alluded to, maintain the programme of activity established across children's service planning partnerships and increase this funding by a further £6 million for 25-26.
Paul O'Kane, to be followed by Eleanor Whittam.
The report has stressed clearly the importance of workforce in delivering the promise, and in particular the pivotal role of social workers. It calls for recommendations to be met, including the Scottish Government and COSLA producing a joint workforce improvement plan that was due in autumn 2024. It should now be delivered as a matter of urgency, and it says that ways of working should be reviewed to drive out duplication and wasted effort. Given that the latest Chief Social Work survey reports from Social Work Scotland describe a crisis in local authorities in recruitment, retention, an ageing workforce and capacity, does the Minister agree that social work and the wider workforce are vital in delivering the promise? And other than just the words of support that she mentioned in her statement, which I think were the only mention of workforce in the entire statement this afternoon, when will that improvement plan be produced? And what action will be undertaken to tackle the issues that are leading to depletion and burnout?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I don't think it was the only reference to the workforce. I think I did put on record a clear thanks to everyone involved in their work across Scotland and for those for their priority and their commitment to driving forward change. Now, I've already stated that the Scottish Government fully recognises the pressures the social work workforce is under, and we will work collectively to ensure that children and young people receive the level of care that they deserve. I set out in my answer to Miles Briggs, we're clear that a strong and well-supported social work profession is absolutely key to delivering the aims set out in the independent review of adult social care and the promise. We are already working collectively with partners to identify different ways to resolve the issues facing social work, such as the recruitment and retention that Mr O'Kane mentions. And as I've said, the immediate priority has been focused on wider improvements for the profession through the development of the National Social Work Agency, which the Scottish Government is committed to.
Whittam, followed by Gillian Mackay.
Following on from the issues raised by Miles Briggs, can I ask the Minister what work has been done for our care experienced young people regarding homelessness prevention to ensure that corporate parental responsibilities extend to the transition away from care and that young people are not funnelled down the homelessness route when they should be supported by their local authorities into adulthood and sustainable independent living, especially in light of the current housing emergency and the rise in care leavers experiencing homelessness?
Minister.
The Scottish Government's continuing care and aftercare policies help to provide young people with a supported transition from care, with eligible young people able to live with their carers until they turn 21 and to access support and assistance based on their individual need. Following our recent consultation, work is also ongoing across the Scottish Government and with stakeholders to ensure that eligible young people would continue to benefit from a person-centred support package which enables them to thrive into adulthood. We've not paused nor put on hold young people leaving care, having priority for housing support, and we remain committed to supporting care experienced young people to flourish. Work is also continuing across the Scottish Government on the care leaver payment following the passage of the Social Security Amendment Scotland Act, and this will provide a one-off £2,000 payment to young people moving on from care, with the intention of helping to reduce some of the financial barriers that they may face as they transition into adulthood.
Gillian Mackay, to be followed by Willie Rennie.
Thanks, Deputy Presiding Officer. One of the quotes from the Promise Scotland on this report is some people, some organisations and some systems are not yet doing enough, and this risks the country as a whole failing to deliver the promise. What is the Minister doing, both with these organisations who are not doing enough, but also cross-portfolio, to make sure that individual intransigence within organisations is not risking the promise as a whole?
Minister.
I absolutely agree in terms of that not only cross-portfolio approach, but an approach at all levels. Keeping the promise is dependent on all levels of government and it is important to everyone, and everyone has a responsibility to help to deliver and drive forward that change. My commitment to delivering the promise is absolutely rock solid, and as I set out in my speech, a number of key actions already taken by this government, and the detailed implementation plan sets out the broad range of activities across ministerial portfolios, and of course that's overseen by the Cabinet Subcommittee, ensuring that we really do take that cross-portfolio approach. I've met with different ministers in relation to how the promise meets or intertwines with our own respective portfolios, and that's something that I will absolutely continue to do.
Willie Rennie, to be followed by Bill Kidd.
So we discover there's no secured unit beds, something the Minister wasn't going to tell us, and we were only found out because Martin Whitfield asked the question. She said it was really important, but she didn't include it in her statement. Why is there no reference to the fact that we're way behind schedule on spending the whole family wellbeing fund? Why is there no mention of the fact that care-experienced children go from social worker to social worker year after year after year? None of that is mentioned. This is deeply unimpressive. And is she surprised that care-experienced people have no confidence in this government to deliver the promise?
Minister.
In relation to the issues with secure capacity, no, that wasn't something that I was going to put in my statement. I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm very aware that you can view this on a daily basis yourself. That is what members have done. I'm more than happy. I am standing here. I am accountable in relation to that. And I have said that this is an issue that I am monitoring on a daily basis. And I am committed both in the short and the long term to find the solutions to this. I am very disappointed that we find ourselves in this situation, given the words that I have given to both Parliament and committee prior to this. In relation to whole family wellbeing, that's something that I am absolutely committed to. I believe that whole family wellbeing is absolutely key in terms of delivering on the promise. I think that we are making very, very good progress. I understand that in relation to children's service planning partnerships, there were issues in terms of the time that it takes to make that transformational change at local level. But as I've said, we are invested and we are prioritising it, and that can be proven by the extra £6 million that's going to children's service planning partnerships.
Thank you. We've got a number of colleagues who want to ask questions. We will need a bit more brevity in questions, but also in the responses. Minister, I call for Bill Kidd to be followed by Stephen Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Minister what steps she is taking to ensure that children are empowered, involved and included in the current and future delivery of the promise.
Minister.
So I've made very clear in ensuring that the voice of care-experienced children, young people and adults across Scotland is at the heart of the work underway and continues to drive the actions that we take. The Scottish Government continues to build voice through the breadth of consultation and engagement undertaken at a national level, and I'm very grateful to organisations across Scotland who take the time and focus to link into this and lead engagement. I want to continue to ensure that children and young people feel empowered and included, and I want to ensure that we continue to reach as many young people, including those who might not have engaged before. So the member and the Chamber can be assured that that will continue to be a priority for me and a number of organisations who have helped to facilitate many of these conversations so far.
Stephen Kerr, to be followed by Nicola Sturgeon.
Well, I think Willie Rennie's right to be deeply unimpressed with this statement and the answers we're getting to the questions that we've asked. But we have learned, at least there's a new way of saying failing without saying failing, and that is to say we're behind schedule, but we're still on course. Well, I just don't think that's good enough. The Minister talks about embedding the promise across government, but the Oversight Board states the reality. As was mentioned by Gillian Mackay, many organisation systems are not doing enough. So, Minister, will the Minister reply to this question? Who exactly is failing to step up? And what consequences, if any, will they face for this failure?
Minister.
Mr Kerr disagrees with my assumption that we are failing, and not my words, failing but still on course. But can I just remind Mr Kerr that the promise, the Oversight Board report specifically said that it is still deliverable. The promise can still be kept. So I think I would just refer him back to that report. I would also say I have been very clear standing here today that I think that everyone in Scotland is accountable for this. The promise means something to everyone. There is a responsibility, of course, at government level to show leadership in relation to this. And I've already went through a number of the areas where we have made positive progress. But there are also responsibilities for local authorities, for our third sector, for a number of different organisations. And I encourage them and I work with them so that we can all take this together and deliver the promise by 2030.
Sturgeon, to be followed by Ash Regan.
Can I commend the Minister on the continued commitment to the promise and to the significant progress made? However, the Oversight Board is clear that delivery by 2030 does need increased pace and renewed purpose. So I'd like to press the Minister on this point specifically. Can she outline what it is in her statement that will increase this pace of delivery, rather than simply continue it at a pace that we all agree is not sufficient at this stage?
Minister.
Can I thank Nicola Sturgeon for that question? I'd also like to thank Ms Sturgeon for her engagement today on this, and of course for the priority and the dedication that she gave to this matter during her time as First Minister. I want to be very clear, as I already have, that my commitment to delivering the promise is rock solid, and I am driven as Minister to do the best that I can for all children and young people across Scotland. I think one of the key issues in relation to my statement is the introduction of a promise bill later this year. That will be a major step forward in setting the legislative direction, and of course the Promise Progress Framework published in December, developed with COSLA and the Promise Scotland, will provide the means to track the outcomes where we want to see change and the indicators which will give us a much clearer picture than we have had to date of what is happening and what needs to go further.
And very briefly, Ash Regan.
Thank you. Given that the Oversight Board report confirms systemic failures in child safeguarding, I'm afraid I am just not picking up a sense of the recognition of this and the accountability that is needed from the government in driving this forward. So in light of the calls in petition PE 1979 for both an independent inquiry into the mishandling of child protection and the establishment of a national whistleblowing officer for education and children's services, will the government commit to ensuring whistleblowers are properly protected, public bodies are held accountable for safeguarding failures, and they are not left to mark their own homework?
Thank you. I appreciate this is a very sensitive issue. I believe the member has written to me before on this. I have already met with the petitioners around this, and I'm looking into their calls and their concerns, and I will update accordingly following that.
Thank you, Minister. With apologies to those I couldn't call, we're going to have to move on to the next item of business. There will be a brief pause before we do so to allow front benches to change.